Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode here on the Bolt Report. As always, my name is Jake Ricker. Alongside me is my good friend and co host, Michael Wax. And today we are joined by a special guest, Dylan Foster, a Florida Panthers fan that's coming in to help us break down some of the Panthers side of things in this round one matchup. The Battle of Florida is back. And Dylan, thanks for taking some time out of your day and welcome to the show.
Yeah, of course, man. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So let's get right into it, guys. This is the Battle of Florida. Third time we're seeing this one. The Lightning won the first two rounds, and now we're looking for another great matchup. They've been very fun ones so far to start things off. They've always been a physical series, even though the Lightning did have the sweep last year. It's always been a fun matchup. It should be no different today. First and foremost, let's take a look at the schedule for this series. Lightning starting things off on Sunday against the Panthers in Sunrise. Game one is at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. So shout out to the NHL for scheduling that game in the middle of the day for whatever reason. Next game would be Tuesday, the 23rd at 7:30. Game three back at Amalie would be on Thursday at 7 p.m. And then game four on Saturday, the 27th. That one at 5 p.m. So different times for every single of the first four games. And then games 5, 6, and 7 are all to be determined. And if necessary, but those on Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday going over into the next month as well. So nothing crazy going with the schedule though. But Dylan, I wanted to ask you this: how do you feel about the 12:30 game on Sunday?
I mean, it's great for me. It's right after I get off work, so I won't have to go to bed. So that's great for me. It's definitely weird though that they did the afternoon game, like you said, with every other game being 5, 7, like all evening night games. So it'll be interesting to see how they schedule 5, 6, and 7 if they happen. Presumably, I feel like 5 is for sure going to happen. So it'll just be interesting to see how they schedule those. I was
Yeah.
trying to look and see why they scheduled it that way on Saturday because I guess they're just the later game on Saturday because there's a 2 o'clock game and an 8 o'clock game. So we're just the middle game, I guess.
Uh,
Um,
the
so they
NHL is
are
weird.
starting games earlier. We just happen to be the middle one. But it's definitely interesting that they decided to start all the way at 12:30 with this first one.
And Michael, the Lightning sometimes have some issues with those noon games as well.
Yeah, I will say, not to credit the NHL because this is still a whack schedule, but last time that we faced the Panthers in the playoffs, we had a back-to-back in 2022, which is
Oh,
ridiculous.
right.
So I'm glad that didn't happen this time.
Yes.
That's nice.
But the 12:30 game is, ridiculous. The 5 o'clock game is also ridiculous. I understand that with the first round, you're trying to get people basically seated at 12 o'clock and watching hockey until the last game ends. But this is one of the premier matchups, and I'm very surprised that it's getting these weird billings. But ultimately, I think the Lightning and the Panthers will be, at least in game one, maybe a little bit happier that they're getting this out of the way.
Dylan, you said you're getting off work just in time for this game. Unfortunately for me and Michael, who are working in minor league baseball, we're having to go to work right during this game. So we're
Yeah.
missing game one,
So you
which is
guys
a
will miss
bummer
it.
for us. Yeah, that's a little unfortunate, but we'll be able to catch the rest of the series. Let's take a look at the previous games between these two teams in this regular season. Now, this is always a fun topic because, of course,
Gosh.
there's the topic of does the regular season mean anything when it comes to the playoffs? Because the playoffs are an entirely beast, but we'll still take a look at it here. The Panthers are the better ones in this series. They won 3-2 and 9-2, both games at Amalie Arena. And then the third game of the series was won by the Lightning in a 5-3 win on the road. So far, guys, the home team has been the one that's lost in this 3-game set. Normally, you have a lot more games between these two teams, but the NHL schedule was a little bit different this year. So something to note there. But Dylan, I'll start it off with you. Do you take anything away from these first couple of regular season games, or is it for you, if the playoffs, anything can happen?
So it's two things. For one, that graphic does not make me feel good because having lost the game at home and having that graphic the way that it is, it's like, okay, are we going to have this series where we see like the Lightning will win the three first games at Sunrise, and then we'll go win the 3 games at Amalie, and then it'll be a game 7, and at that point it doesn't matter. Like at that point, all cards are on the table. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays in because we've definitely seen series like that plenty of times in hockey. Like this is not some new phenomenon. And then The 9-2 game was 100% a an anomaly by Vasilevsky. You don't ever see him have those kind of games. Like
It's a weird game.
it's a once a season game you see him have those games. So it'll be interesting to see how he responds in the playoffs. But at the end of the day, Vasilevsky is one of the best goalies in the league. And I know people were like, this year he didn't have nearly as good of a year. I really don't care when it comes to playoffs. Like, there was a reason I told numerous people, like, I did not want to play you guys in the first round. Not only because it's a Florida matchup, so it's just instantly like any other major matchup, but also at the end of the day, like, it's playoffs. Vasilevsky's going to lock in. Like, he's not going to allow 5 goals a game. It just won't happen.
I said it on our preview show, like before the Toronto game, the last game of the season. I don't really care about what happens in the regular season when the playoffs start. And I have yet to be proven wrong about that because last year we came into the series against Toronto and Vasilevsky was pretty bad. And we lost every single game in overtime at home. So that was a consistent trend. We're, I think, 0-10 in our last 10 overtime playoff games, which is ridiculous. And they need to figure out a way to figure that out. But, whatever. I think the Lightning should be okay as far as, translating their success. I think the Panthers this should be their wheelhouse. This should be their forte, especially after last year and what we saw in the matchups that I think will carry over is the Panthers' physicality. They dummied the Lightning on a couple of occasions. And the game where the Lightning actually went up 4-0, when the Panthers made it more physical, the Lightning kind of crumbled. And they still won that game, but it was definitely one of those ones where you're looking at it and sort of holding your breath. So if the Panthers can keep on doing that, I think this is going to be not only a difficult series for the Lightning, but a very enjoyable series for the fans.
Oh, there's no question about that. This is always a fun series, and I fully expect this one to be another great one. And kind of continuing with that, this next segment that we're going to do, looking at the team stats between the two teams. Once we get deeper into the playoffs, of course, we would always do looking at the playoff stats for both teams. But of course, in round one, you can't really do that because no games have been played. So we're looking at the regular season stats here again. But I think there's some interesting things to look at from these stats. So looking at it here, the Lightning, they are better on the power play, penalty kill, and goals for. But the big one here is the goals against, where the Panthers 2.41. They were the best defensive team in the NHL this year when it came to goals against. Of course, the biggest difference here for the Lightning is that power play, first in the league, 28.6%. It's actually the best in franchise history for the Lightning and is 10th best all time in the NHL. It was hovering around 30% for a little while there, but fell late in the season when the Lightning hit a little bit of a slump. So, Dylan, what are your thoughts when you look at these team stats and specifically that goals against category, which seems to be the biggest difference in this series?
So that was a huge thing for us all year. Was we kind of talk about defense wins games, and I realize it's probably like the biggest cliche in sports. I think at this point, especially when you look at like leagues like the NBA where everybody's scoring 115 plus a night, it seems like. But with the NHL, I really feel like it's the one sport that probably still holds true to defense wins games, and having that like you said 2.4 per is huge. And then because with the power play kill, like teams are gonna be on the penalty kill. Like I think it was 83 to 82 or like 83 and a half to 82 and a half, something around that was what you guys had. And so it's gonna be a big thing of, okay, can our penalty kill come up and stop Tampa from getting these 30% of the time they're scoring on power plays? Like if we allow that, we are in a lot of trouble. Like we have a big problem. But I feel like one problem we also dealt with some games that I watched was we didn't get on the power play enough. Like we were giving teams more penalty minutes. Like we had 2 guys this year that had over 100 penalty minutes. We can't do that in the playoffs. Like we can't have just penalty minutes after penalty minutes. We will dig ourselves a hole we can't ever get out of, especially against a team like Tampa.
Yeah, I again, regular season stats are nice. One of the things that I really took from this season was not necessarily the percentages, but when you looked at the Lightning's power play, it really, I know it was 10th all time that you mentioned, best of franchise history. Jake, it looked really just jumbled a lot of the time. Like it really did, especially towards the end of the season, which is when the percentages started to drop. Meanwhile, the penalty kill was consistently excellent. So that I'm not necessarily concerned with, but the power play for sure. It's one of those things where if they lose the opening draw, they're kind of uh, in a world of trouble trying to get that puck into the zone, trying to get it past the four blockades that we've seen on the penalty killers at the opposing blue line. Dylan, I want to ask you specifically. I know you mentioned about defense wins games, and it's going a little bit off topic, but it still has to do with goals against. Aaron Ekblad has only played 4 games since is that March 9th, and he hasn't played since April 2nd. They said he's good to go for game 1. Like, what did you see in those 4 games that maybe surprised you in a good way, and then maybe was a little bit troubling in a bad way?
So it's for one, it's just more depth. Like having him gives more depth not only to our lines, just because you've got Montour, you've got Forsling, then having Ekblad's huge, and then just having other guys that we've picked up this year, like Ekman Larson was a huge pickup. So it's just another piece. It's with any team, you take one key player out, and somebody has to step up. So losing those key players are huge. Obviously, I like what he brings. It's hard hitting. You're going to get good passing out of him, good assists. He always has good assist numbers. I know this year his numbers were obviously down just because of how few games he played. He only played 51 games this year, but he still had 18 points, and 14 of them were assists. So you're always going to get pretty good passing out of him. I feel like we truthfully kind of got robbed of seeing what Ekblad could do this year, just because normally he's pretty consistently like around that 25, 30 point mark from what I've seen, like the couple of years that we've had him. But the perk that I saw was he's plus 27. So even though he's only played 51 games, he's only scored 24 or 18 points, excuse me. He's still plus 27 on on the defensive side, which is huge. And that's where like you look at a team like Tampa, and I feel like a lot more of your guys are closer to that like 0 to 10 mark, and you've got a couple guys in the negatives. And that's one place where I feel like a couple of our guys have like really thrived on like staying on defense. But excuse me, like you said, it's playoffs are a different animal. The Panthers come out and score 5-6 goals a game, and the Lightning could be terrible, and it could be the total opposite. The Panthers could forget how to score anything, and the Lightning could score 5 goals a game, and we could be out in 4 games. I think last year's total proof, like you guys said, did anybody think the Panthers were going to beat Boston in the first round last year? Not a chance. I don't think anybody went into that series thinking, yep, the Panthers are going to pull that one off. No. I was a Panthers fan. I didn't think it. I was like, no. I was like, I literally said to myself before the series, I was like, we can win one game. I will be happy. And then when we won the second game, I was like, okay, this has to be a lie. And then game 7, obviously, I'm like, okay, we have a chance. I really don't think we're going to win, but I was like, we have a chance. And where you said, Mike, about how you guys struggle in overtime, I feel like that's where the Panthers really could capitalize. Like if we can force overtime, I think we have almost an easier time of winning the series. As weird as that is, because you never want to talk about forcing overtime. But I think last year was proof. I think this year continues to be proof that we don't lose a whole lot of overtime games. I think this year, what is that? I have it pulled up right now. We lost 6 overtime games this year, and I know we were in a heck of a lot more games than that. I know even within the last month, I know we won multiple overtime games or a shootout. That was another huge thing, which this is where it goes back to Vasilevsky of being such a dominant goalie, is shootouts. Like I know we had a shootout recently where Reinhart was the only player to score in the entire shootout. If you can go through a shootout and have that happen, that's gold. To where it's like, okay, we literally need one guy to score and we can win. That's perfect. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. But I think overtime, honestly, could be one of the biggest factors in the entire series.
Yeah, and
Yeah, it looks like sorry, Jake. It looks like you guys went 7-0 in overtime last year in the playoffs. So
yeah,
pretty good. Well, and that's something the Lightning have struggled with over the last couple of years. The good news for the Lightning is that at least when it comes to the regular season stats, is that you don't play 3-on-3 or a shootout. So you regular
Yeah.
5-on-5 hockey, of course, during overtime, which helps the Lightning a little bit. And listen, I think for the Lightning, the key to this we'll get to our keys to the series for both these teams in a little bit here. But if the Panthers are taking penalties and the Lightning can stay on the power play and have Nikita Kucherov out there all the time, that's going to help them a ton. They've got to make this into a goal scoring series, and with the way this series usually goes, there's usually a lot of penalty minutes for both teams, just because of the way these guys do not like each other whatsoever. So it should be interesting. A couple of that goals against for the Panthers, and then the goals that the Lightning can score. We could have a either low scoring series where the Panthers take it, or a high scoring series where the Lightning take it. Or like you said, Dylan, playoffs are a different beast. It could be the complete opposite. Who knows? That's kind of the
Yeah.
fun of the playoffs as well. All right, well, let's look at some difference makers for this series. It's something we always talk about in sports in the postseason. There's always that one player that can really change how a team's playoff can go, or even just one series. So I got our difference makers here. Dylan, me and Michael selected Anthony Duclair for ours. He's got 8 goals, 7 assists for 15 points. That's specifically with the Lightning. He's got more on the season because he started off, of course, in San Jose, but he's been excellent for the Lightning so far. And then Dylan, you selected Brandon Montour, 8 goals, 25 assists, and 33 points. Take me why Montour is your difference maker for this series.
Well, I think you look at last year and the dominant year he had, having 70 plus points. I believe it was 73 that he had, but having 70 plus points, and then this year dealing with a couple injuries that he dealt with, not looking nearly as glamorous this year. But you've seen what he can do. So if he can do that again in the playoffs and boosting that defensive line, like we talked about, Panthers were one of the best defenses in the entire league, and it's one of the best defensive years we've had in years. So seeing that, if he can help not only boost that defensive line, but also boost the offense, like he's proven that he can do, it's going to be huge for us, especially like you said, against a team that has proven that they can score and score and score.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Jake. Yeah.
is a big side of that for the Panthers. Now, Anthony Duclair, of course, for the Lightning, he played for the Panthers most
Yep.
recently before the San Jose Sharks. A little familiarity there as well for Duclair, but he's been excellent ever since he came over with the Lightning. I mean, he's been scoring a ton of goals, and of course, anytime you play with Nikita Kucherov, that always helps. No question about that. But he's been excellent on the offensive side of things for sure, and I think that familiarity can help them out a little bit too, especially because he played with the Panthers in the postseason. Michael, what are your take on Duclair here as a difference maker for the Bolts?
If you had told me last year that Anthony Duclair would be on the Lightning, I would be shocked because of how well he did with the Panthers in the playoffs last year. But cap casualties are a thing, and in a weird circumstance, he ended up facing the Panthers. So last year, Duclair had 4 goals, 7 assists, 11 points in 20 playoff games. With the Lightning, he's been fantastic. 15 points, as you mentioned, in his brief little stint. He set the record for most consecutive games with a point to start off a Lightning tenure, which is wild. Of course, that helps when you're playing with Nikita Kucherov, but I digress. He's one of those guys. We talked about depth scoring in our little mini preview with RBLR before the Toronto game, but he's one of those guys that, even though he's on the first line, you would probably consider depth scoring. He's not one of the big names. And so if he scores, if guys that are on the third line score, then it makes everybody's job a little bit easier. So Duclair's not one of those guys that is going to get power play one time. And so whatever he can do at 5-on-5 is going to make the Lightning's job or the Lightning's task of beating the Panthers a little bit easier.
Dylan, I saw you rolling your eyes a little bit in there when we were talking about Duclair. Are you a little worried about him for this postseason?
I was so upset. Duclair was probably the biggest. I really didn't like losing anybody from the team last year. I didn't like losing Gudis. He was a huge hit man. All the dude did was hit, and I loved it. The only reason I'm not as upset about that anymore is just because we've found guys to filter in. Ekman Larson's been pretty good with hits. Kachuk, just all the man does is assist and hit people. That's all he does. But Duclair, it was just every team has like that. Every great team has like that guy. And like you said, Duclair's been hot. And I knew coming into the playoffs, like, this guy's been really hot. I hope we don't have to play Tampa. And sure enough, here we are. I knew probably eventually we would end up facing you guys one way or another, whether there was like an Eastern Conference Finals or just like a initial matchup. But I definitely was like, yeah, let's like just not do it in the first round. Like, let's just get another team out of the way first, and then like we'll worry about Tampa. At this point, like, teams are out of the way, like whatever. But yeah, losing Duclair, I was super upset. And of course, then seeing him go to a team like San Jose, I was like, he's wasting his talent in San Jose, especially after how bad they were this year. So I guess for Duclair, I'm happy that he's on a better team. I just wish it was anybody except Tampa.
Yeah, well, we really enjoyed him over here in Tampa so far, and we're hoping he can do the same for the Lightning this year, of course, that he did for the Panthers when he was with them for the postseason. All right, let's take a look at some keys to this series here. Dylan, we'll start with yours for the Panthers. Take me through what the Panthers need to do to win this one against the Lightning.
So I'm definitely going to start with Reinhart has to just not fall off. I feel like we see this all the time in every sport. You've got a guy that's blazing hot all season or blazing hot near the end of the season, and then playoffs come and they forget how to play their sport, whether it's hockey, baseball, football, whatever. They just completely forget how to play. So if that happens with him, we have a major problem. That's a major red flag, because like you guys mentioned earlier, on a team where you're not scoring nearly as much, and Reinhart scored, 23 more goals than the next closest guy on our team. That's a problem if he can't score. So unless multiple other guys step up, something has to happen. So that's the first thing. The second one, and I've mentioned it a couple times about us being super hit heavy, but being aggressive on defense, we have to hit guys. I'm just going to be honest. It's a sport of hockey. We have to lay out the hard hits. Obviously, I want them to be clean. I'm not trying to have us hit and, get 300 penalty minutes every game. That's not what I want. But kind of instilling fear early on, like you guys kind of talked about with Kachuk. Like, I don't care if I touch the puck the first 10 minutes, I'm going to hit you. So if, instilling that fear almost early on of we're going to hit the crap out of you is a huge thing in my opinion. And then, Jake, I talked to you about this a little bit before, but injuries happen all the time. And Stolarz has played great in goalie when he's come in. He's won 16 games this year out of the 24 that he started. He's only allowed 2 goals. Like, it's barely over 2 goals he's allowed. He's only allowed, looking at the math right now, 51 goals on 684 attempts. So he's got one of the better save percentages in the league. I realize he doesn't have nearly as big of a sample size. When you've got a guy like Bobby who's had nearly 1,600 save attempts this year. So it's almost 1,000 less saves, save attempts. But if something happens to Bobby, we've seen Bobby, and if anybody's watched Panthers games this year, you've seen Bobby get in a few chippy situations where guys are trampling him, whatever. And I realize it happens with every team. But unfortunately, and it seems to always happen to a couple key guys in the playoffs from different teams, guys get some big injuries. So if, God forbid, that does happen with Bobby, Stolarz has to be ready to come in just like Lyon did last year. And, I mean, he balled out too last year. But that was another guy I didn't want to lose last year. But, bygones are bygones. But so, yeah, I think Stolarz has to be ready to come in, as well as other guys. If other guys got really injured last year too. Ekblad got hurt. Kachuk, broke his sternum. Somehow played another game. Don't ask me how he did that. I've never seen any athlete do that in all the years I've watched sports. But so backups just have to be ready. But I'm definitely focusing on Stolarz. God forbid something happened to Bobby. Stolarz has to be ready to go.
Yeah, well, and you bring up some great points about injuries. Listen, it does happen, and we saw this happen to the Lightning with Braden Point when they were trying to get that third Stanley Cup in a row. Braden Point went down. That was a big reason they could not finish out that series against the Avalanche, and that was a big factor as well in this series for the Panthers in the first time around. I think the Panthers had 3 different goaltenders in that first series, which didn't help them because they kept changing things up. But this time around, of course, they hope everybody can stay healthy. And listen, even as a fan of the game, you hope everybody's healthy because it just makes the series more exciting. It makes it more fun. But you're right. you do have to be ready for that. Because I can tell you one thing, the Lightning are without Jonas Johansson right now. I don't know when he's going to be available. Matt Tompkins is our current backup, so things could get dicey if Vasilevsky goes down. Although Tompkins did play really good against the Toronto Maple Leafs, so who knows? Maybe Tompkins comes out and does something amazing. Hopefully that doesn't happen if Vasi is healthy, but it's going to be interesting. Michael, looking at our 3 keys to the game, can you take us through these keys for the Bolts?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, as we have mentioned, even in my problems with the power play, it is still one of the best power plays of all time. This is one of those power plays that can hurt you from the moment the opening faceoff drops to start the 2-minute clock to the final second. They have scored in a variety of ways. They have different guys that can hurt you. One of the things that has changed over the season has been Nikita Kucherov's willingness to take shots on the power play. But as we saw against Toronto in the last game, hopefully this works in the playoffs as well. It looks like the bumper play with Braden Point is available, which is something that wasn't available at the beginning of the season. Secondly, strong defense. The Lightning's defense has been very hit or miss this season, specifically in the way that they have taken the new defensive system from Jeff Blashill. It's gotten better as the season has gone on, the box and one formation that they've been playing. But I don't know. Jake, you could speak on this. I'm still worried about their defense a little bit. The 6 names are not the concern. It's basically just the structure that they play. And then finally, depth scoring. The depth scoring, as I mentioned with Duclair, is something that's going to either make or break the Lightning series against the Panthers. Guys like Mikey Eyssimont, Nick Paul, who has been really good this year. Anthony Cirelli has finally hit 20 goals. If we see call-ups from the crunch, I know that Luke Glendening and Tyler Mott are both practicing and look like they're ready to go for game 1. But if they're not, if we see guys that come into the lineup like Connor Sheary or any call-ups from the crunch, they need to be ready to push forward and try to get some goals. Because one of the things that propelled the Lightning to 3 straight Stanley Cup finals, number 1, was that third line of Gord, Goudreau, and Coleman, who not only shut you down, but also scored. And number 2, I know they didn't put up a ton of points. I don't know if you remember this, Jake. The line of Belmar, Maroon, and Riley Nash in 2022, they were undefeated with Riley Nash in the lineup until the Stanley Cup Finals, which is nuts. But just to throw it back to, I know I mentioned your name a couple of times. Are you still concerned about the way that the Lightning's defense looks?
Yes. I mean, listen, the defense wasn't. We looked at the goals against stat earlier for the regular season and how much better it was for the Panthers. It wasn't great for the Lightning. There's no question about that. You are right, though. It did get better as the season went on. So that's something to take into consideration. But at the end of the day, as we've said multiple times on this preview show, it's playoffs. It's an entirely different beast. You really don't know how things are going to go. Hopefully they will be good defensively, and it's something they're probably going to have to do to get deep into the playoffs. But it's hard to say for the postseason. We don't know how it's going to go. They did play better as of late, so that does help how I feel a little bit. You're 100% right about depth scoring. And listen, there's the reason Nikita Kucherov has one of the best cases for MVP right now is because there was no depth scoring, and it was all Nikita Kucherov. I mean, he was absolutely, as Dylan knows, Kucherov was unbelievable this year. I mean, 144 points. And listen, Kucherov, I mean, he could do it himself. Who knows? He's just been that good, but you would love to get him some help because the Panthers, I'm sure, Dylan, you can probably attest to this, they're going to try and lock down Nikita Kucherov.
Well, of course. I mean, and same thing, and I keep relating this to other sports, but you have, key guys on any team. What are you going to do? You're going to double them up. You're going to force them to get rid of the puck, that sort of thing. But honestly, with a guy like Kucherov, he's got 100 assists this year. So it's almost like, do we want him to have the puck or do we not want him to have the puck? Because he seems to do almost better without the puck. So there's almost no real way you can lock him down. So the only way what you can do is, like I've said, hit the guy, don't get penalty minutes, and double him up in an area when you can. but you can only do so much because guys like that, they're not going to be stopped. Nikita's going to come out of the series, unless this is a 4-game series. He's going to come out with at least half a dozen points. He'll probably be one of the top point players in the series, like no doubt. Like I said, unless for whatever reason this just becomes a lopsided series and it's like 4-0, 4-1. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting. But yeah, Kucherov I'm very scared about. Like I said, Vasilevsky I'm very scared about because he can turn it on just like that. And, he's this legend again that never can be scored on.
Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but I'm excited for the series after doing this. There's a lot of great players in this series. There's so much history behind it. It's going to be a ton of fun. I know these fan bases usually don't get along very well because of the Battle of Florida, but it should be a blast. It should be a great one. And we're going to close it out with some fun predictions. We probably all know who's going to pick who in this one, but hey, let's have some fun with it here. Dylan, I'll start with you. Give me your winner of the series, and this one is where you can kind of get more into it and not as biased, but how many games as well?
So definitely, yeah, I think the Panthers are going to win, but I'm also not ignorant of my opponent. Like I 100% think to me, it's a 50-50 series. Honestly, a lot of other teams, I wouldn't have necessarily said that. Like, had we had to play the Capitals or something, I would have been like, yeah, Panthers are going to win, no question. Had we played the Leafs, Panthers are going to win, no question. Honestly, even had we played Boston, Boston's not the same team. Tampa is a different thing. You guys are playoff experience. You guys have won Stanley Cups. You guys have multiple players that are playoff experience. You also have a guy like Duclair who's played for the Panthers, so it's almost like an insider information kind of thing. And then there's just a lot of factors that go into it. And I think, realistically, I'd like to win in 6 or in 5. But I really don't think that's going to happen. Truthfully, I think it's going to be a 7-game series as much as I don't want it to go to 7 games. I really don't see, if this series is consistent and competitive, I really don't see how it doesn't go to 7 games. I just don't.
Yeah, it's going to be a close and fun series for sure, especially with the way these two teams have been going. You would expect it to go 7. Michael, what about you?
I have it going 7 as well. I just have it going the other way. I think there's a respect here. This is definitely the most difficult series that either team is going to have to go through in the Eastern Conference. Like, all due respect to the Rangers, all due respect to the Hurricanes, someone's going to get beat up in this series. I saw you make a face there, so I don't
Carolina's
know.
loaded this year. Carolina's loaded. I
They've
really don't
struggled in
want
the
to play Carolina
postseason
either.
sometimes.
Until they win a game in the Eastern Conference, or in the Eastern Conference Finals, they're 0-12 since they last won the Stanley Cup. I'm not worried about them. So, I'm not trying to get Carolina Hurricanes fans in my mentions, please. Twitter's already as much of a nightmare as there is, but I do think, as we saw in 2021 and 2022, I would say that, the Panthers were the most difficult opponent for the Lightning in 2021. And in 2022, they took a chunk out of the Lightning. Even though it was a 4-game series, there was a lot of energy that was expended. And there were a couple of games where the Panthers vastly outplayed the Lightning, and Andre Vasilevsky was superhuman, especially in that clinching game in 2022 where he went 49 for 49. He gave up 3 goals in 4 games. Is that going to happen again? No, it's not, which is why I think this is going to go 7. And I cannot wait to see a game 7 as a fan between these two teams. But as a fan of one of these teams, it will be the most stressful part of my life, I think.
Yeah, no, it's going to be very stressful this series because you're right. It's a physical series. One of these teams is going to get beat up pretty bad. It should be a tight one. I don't expect this to be, super lopsided. With that said, of course, Lightning in 4, right?
Yeah.
I had to throw that one in there in the last second. No, I'm going to go. I don't want to do the same prediction as everybody. I don't know if this is going to go 7. We haven't seen it go 7 yet between these two teams. I think one of these teams gets beat up enough to where this ends a little bit early. I'm going to go Lightning in 6 because, of course, I'm going to pick the Lightning. But I think one of these teams wins it in 6 games because I think one of these teams is going to get beat up enough to where they're not going to be able to make it to a 7-game series. Game 7 would be a ton of fun, but I could definitely see this going in 6. So I would love to hear from our fans as well. Anybody listening in, let us know in the comments down below. What are your predictions for this series? Drop them in the comments or wherever you may be watching. Dylan, thanks so much for taking some time out of your day and joining us. Where can fans check your sports coverage out if they want to see what you're doing?
So I haven't been posting nearly as much, but I'm always like reposting and like commenting on certain things. I actually totally random, but do you guys know about the whole Haley Van Lith, Haley Cavender thing that just happened?
I don't.
No,
So,
I don't.
So Van Lith transferred from LSU and is going to TCU.
Oh, okay.
And Hannah Cavender, who everybody thought was done, is going back to Miami for another year. And I had made this comment when I saw it because the whole thing was like, oh, Van Lith's going to play with Haley Cavender at TCU. And I was like, yeah, until she transfers back to Miami to play with her sister. And all of a sudden I go to work and then I see this notification that she's transferring to Miami. And I have like 50 likes on this comment and like 7 re-comments of people being like, oh my gosh, are you from the future? And I was like, this might have been the most obvious thing ever. I'm like, why would she not go back to Miami to play with her sister? But it was super funny moment for me. That was probably the most recent, like, oh my gosh, like what the heck? No,
go to
but
go to Dylan's page to get comments from the future. There you go.
Basically, I guess. But so my Instagram is DillySportsMedia_IG. Twitter, I just use it for work. But yeah, so Instagram's the easiest place to find me. And so yeah, like I said, I'm always reposting different stuff for like college baseball, volleyball, soccer, baseball, football, really almost anything. Yeah.
Yeah, he's doing some awesome stuff in the sports world. So go check him out. We'll link his Instagram page and Twitter as well down in the description. So go check that out. But Dylan, thanks for coming on. Guys, that's going to do it for us in this episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you did enjoy this episode so you don't miss out on future episodes just like this one as well, because we'll be previewing hopefully every round the Lightning get into this postseason. So guys, well, thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time. Go Bolts.